Sarah floated in the observation deck of the massive space station called Concordia Prime. Through the clear walls, she could see hundreds of ships from across the galaxy. Each ship looked different. Some were long and thin like needles. Others were round like bubbles. A few looked like living creatures with wings and tentacles. This was her first time seeing so many alien ships in one place. Sarah was humanity's first ambassador to the Galactic Council. Earth had only joined the galactic community 5 years ago. Most species in the galaxy were millions of years old. Humans were like bobbies compared to them. Sarah checked her tablet one more time. The meeting today would decide the fate of billions of lives. An ancient enemy called the Devourer fleet had woken up after sleeping for thousands of years. These machines ate entire planets and turned them into fuel. They were moving toward the outer rim of the galaxy where many colonies lived. The Council had called this emergency meeting to decide what to do. Sarah had read all the reports. The Devourer fleet was huge. It had thousands of ships, each one bigger than Earth's largest city. When they attacked, nothing survived. A soft chime filled the air. It was time for the meeting to begin. Sarah made her way to the main council chamber. The room was enormous, bigger than any stadium on Earth. Nearly 1,000 beings sat in floating chairs arranged in circles. At the center was a large platform where speakers would stand. Sarah found her seat in the section. The human delegation was small compared to others, just Sarah and 2 advisors. Other species had dozens of representatives. Some had been coming to these meetings for longer than human civilization had existed. The first to speak was Aylar, the prime speaker of the Ethereals. The Ethereals were the oldest known species in the galaxy. They looked like tall, thin beings made of living crystal. Light moved through their bodies in patterns that showed their emotions. Aylar's voice was like music mixed with the sound of wind chimes. Fellow beings of the galaxy, we face a crisis not seen for 3,000 years. The Devourer fleet has awakened. Our sensors show it moving toward sectors 7 through 15. These sectors contain 847 worlds and 200 billion sentient beings. Images appeared in the air above the platform. Sarah saw beautiful worlds with blue oceans and green forests. She saw cities floating in clouds and underwater colonies that sparkled like jewels. All of these places were in the path of the coming destruction. We have studied this problem for weeks, Aylar continued. Our greatest minds from every species have worked together. The mathematics are clear. We cannot stop the Devourer fleet with military force. We do not have enough ships or weapons. Any direct attack would result in the destruction of our core civilizations. Murmurs filled the chamber. Sarah heard the sounds of hundreds of different languages mixing together. Her translator worked hard to keep up with all the conversations around her. A new speaker took the platform. This was General of the Saurian Empire. The Saurians looked like giant lizards that walked on 2 legs. They were known as the greatest warriors in the galaxy. If they said something could not be fought, then it probably could not be fought. The Ethereals speak truth, said in a deep, growling voice. My best generals have run battle simulations. Even if every military ship in the galaxy worked together, we would lose. The Devourer fleet is too strong. It learns from each battle and becomes harder to defeat. More images appeared. These showed battle scenes from the last time the Devourers had attacked. Sarah watched huge fleets of alien ships firing weapons that could destroy mountains. The Devourer ships barely seemed damaged. They kept moving forward, eating everything in their path. Next came L of the collective. There were machine beings, created by an organic species that had died out long ago. They thought only in terms of logic and numbers. Their speaker was a tall robot with glowing blue eyes. I have calculated 47,832 different scenarios, L announced. In 47,831 of them, direct confrontation leads to galactic extinction. Only one path ensures survival of galactic civilization. We must evacuate the core populations from the threatened sectors and abandon the rest. Sarah felt her stomach drop. She had hoped the alien species would have some solution that humans had not thought of, but they were talking about leaving billions of people to die. The logic is sound, Elle continued. We can save perhaps 10 billion beings by focusing on essential personnel, scientists, leaders, genetic samples for species preservation. The rest cannot be saved without risking everything else. Ayler returned to the platform. This is how our species have survived 17 galactic crises over millions of years. We make the hard choices that ensure some life continues. Emotion and attachment to individuals must not cloud our judgment when the survival of civilization itself is at stake. Other speakers took turns. Sarah listened to representatives from dozens of species. Some were shaped like trees with moving branches. Others looked like floating jellyfish made of light. A few appeared to be living rocks that spoke by changing their crystal formations. Every single one said the same thing. Leave the 200 billion people to die. Save who you can. Retreat and survive. This was the way things had always been done. Sarah looked around the chamber. These beings had survived everything the galaxy could throw at them. They had built civilizations that lasted for millions of years. Their technology was like magic compared to what humans had. They must know what they were talking about. But something felt wrong in Sarah's chest. She thought about all those people on all those worlds. People who had families and dreams and hopes for the future. Children who had never seen anything but peace. Artists who created beautiful things. Farmers who grew food to feed their neighbors. How could the solution be to just let them all die? The debate continued for hours, but Sarah realized it was not really a debate. Everyone already agreed. This was just a ceremony, a way to make the terrible decision feel official and proper. Finally, Ayler spoke again. We have heard the wisdom of the galaxy. The path is clear, though it pains us all. We will begin immediate evacuation of essential personnel from the threatened sectors. All resources will be focused on saving those we can. The crystal being turned towards Sarah's section. We have not yet heard from our members. Ambassador, surely humanity sees the wisdom in this approach. Your species may be young, but you understand survival. Every eye in the chamber turned towards Sarah. She felt the weight of their expectations pressing down on her. Nearly 1,000 ancient beings, representing civilizations older than the Earth itself, all waiting for her to agree with them. Sarah stood up slowly. Her legs felt shaky. Her mouth was dry, but she knew what she had to say. Sarah stood in the vast chamber, feeling very small. Around her, beings from hundreds of worlds waited for her to speak. The silence was so complete that she could hear her own heartbeat. She had practiced this moment many times, but nothing had prepared her for the real thing. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Sarah began, her voice barely above a whisper. The chamber's sound system picked up her words and made them louder, but she still felt tiny compared to all these ancient civilizations. I have listened to all your words today. I understand the mathematics you have shown us. I see the logic in your arguments. She paused, looking around the chamber. Many of the aliens seemed pleased that she was agreeing with them. But I need to ask a question, Sarah continued. How do we decide which lives are worth saving? How do we choose who gets to live and who gets left behind? Ayler's crystal body glowed brighter. Ambassador, these are not choices we make lightly. We save those who can preserve knowledge, maintain civilization, and rebuild what is lost. It is the way of survival. But who makes that choice? Sarah pressed. Who decides that a scientist is worth saving but a farmer is not? That a leader matters more than a teacher? That one child deserves to live while another should die? General growled softly. This is not about worth, human. This is about necessity. In war, some must die so others can live. This is basic strategy. On my world, we have a saying, Sarah said. Leave no one behind. We learned it the hard way through many wars and disasters. We found that when we start deciding some people don't matter, we lose something important about who we are. Murmurs started around the chamber. Some species made clicking sounds with their mandibles. Others hummed in frequencies that made Sarah's teeth ache. Her translator was working overtime to convert all the sounds into words she could understand. Elle's mechanical voice cut through the noise. Emotional responses are inefficient. Ambassador, your species' attachment to individuals will lead to extinction. The mathematics cannot be argued with. Maybe our math is different, Sarah replied. What if the value of 200 billion lives cannot be calculated? What if saving them is worth any risk? An older being Sarah had not heard from before stood up. It looked like a giant octopus made of starlight, floating in a bubble of water. Through her translator, she heard its words. Young human, I am elder of the void swimmers. My people have seen civilizations rise and fall for 10 million years. We have survived because we learned to let go. Attachment leads to destruction. This is not cruelty. This is wisdom. Sarah felt her hands shaking. She wanted to sit down and agree with them. These beings had survived everything the galaxy could throw at them. Earth had only discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. What did humans know compared to species that had been traveling the stars since before the dinosaurs existed? But she thought about her grandmother, who had survived the great floods on Earth by organizing neighbors to help each other. She thought about her brother, who was a rescue worker and ran into burning buildings to save strangers. She thought about all the stories of humans who had died trying to help others, even when it seemed hopeless. Maybe attachment is not our weakness, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. Maybe it is our strength. The chamber erupted in sounds of confusion and disagreement. Sarah heard words being translated as impossible, illogical, and dangerous thinking. Some species seemed upset that she was challenging millions of years of galactic wisdom. Aylar raised a crystalline hand and the noise died down. Ambassador, we understand that your species is emotional. This is common among younger races, but emotion must be guided by reason. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. This is universal law. But what if everyone matters? Sarah asked. What if the needs of the many include the needs of everyone? Then everyone dies, General said firmly. This is what happens when emotion rules over logic. Sarah looked around the chamber again. She saw beings that had built wonders she could not imagine. Space stations the size of moons. Ships that could travel between galaxies. Technology that could create new suns or move entire planets. But she also saw something else. She saw beings who had learned to accept loss so well that they no longer tried to prevent it. They had become so focused on survival that they forgot what they were trying to survive for. Has anyone ever tried to save everyone? Sarah asked. In all your millions of years, has anyone ever said no to leaving people behind? The silence that followed was different from before. It was not the silence of beings waiting for her to agree. It was the silence of beings who had never considered the question. Elder spoke first. Such attempts have been made. Young species often try to save everyone when they first encounter galactic-level threats. They all die. Their entire civilizations vanish. We remember them as cautionary tales. But they tried, Sarah said quietly. They thought it was worth the risk. And they were wrong, Elle stated. Their destruction proves the flawed nature of their logic. Sarah took a deep breath. She thought about Earth, far away in its quiet corner of the galaxy. She thought about humanity's short but violent history, all the wars and disasters they had survived, all the times they had to choose between safety and doing what was right. Sometimes they chose safety. Sometimes they chose what was right. But the stories people told, the ones that mattered, were always about the times they chose to help others no matter the cost. Maybe they were not wrong, Sarah said. Maybe they just had not found the right way yet. "There is no right way," Ayler said, and for the first time the crystal being's voice sounded tired. "We have tried every possibility. We have run every calculation. We have learned from every failure. This is the only path that preserves life." "Some life," Sarah corrected. "It preserves some life, which is better than no life at all." Sarah stood quietly for a long moment. Around her, the greatest minds in the galaxy waited for her to accept their wisdom. These were beings who had solved problems that would take human scientists thousands of years to understand. They had built a peaceful galaxy that had lasted for millions of years. But they were asking her to agree that 200 billion people should die, without anyone even trying to save them. "I need to think about this," Sarah said finally. "This is a decision that affects not just humanity, but our place in the galactic community. I would like some time to consider all that has been said." Ayler's glow dimmed slightly. "Of course, Ambassador, but understand that time is limited. The Devourer fleet will reach the outer sectors in 6 days. Evacuation ships must be prepared and positioned. Every hour we delay costs lives." "I understand," Sarah said. She gathered her tablet and notes. "I will have an answer for you tomorrow." As she left the chamber, Sarah heard the conversations beginning behind her. The aliens were discussing her response, trying to understand why humans seemed so different from other young species. Most new members of the galactic community needed only a few meetings to learn how things worked. But as Sarah walked through the corridors of Concordia Prime, she was not thinking about fitting in with the galactic community. She was thinking about those 200 billion people, waiting in their homes while the galaxy decided their fate. And she was thinking about whether humanity was ready to make a choice that might change everything. Sarah had not slept well. She spent the night in her small quarters aboard Concordia Prime, staring out at the stars and thinking about the choice she had to make. Her advisors had tried to talk to her, but she asked them to leave her alone. This was something she needed to decide for herself. She had read through all the reports again. The Devourer fleet was exactly as terrible as the other species had said. Their technology was beyond anything in the current galaxy. The last time they had awakened, it took the combined fleets of 50 species to drive them back into sleep. Even then, the cost had been enormous. Entire civilizations had been lost. The smart choice was obvious. Listen to the beings who had survived for millions of years. Save who they could save. Accept that some deaths were necessary for the greater good. It was logical. It was practical. It was the way intelligent civilizations handled impossible situations. But every time Sarah closed her eyes, she saw faces. Not alien faces from the reports, but human faces. Her neighbors back on Earth. Her family. Her friends. People she cared about. She tried to imagine choosing which of them got to live and which got left behind. She could not do it. When morning came, Sarah put on her formal ambassador's uniform and made her way back to the council chamber. The great room was already full. Word had spread that the humans were taking longer than usual to make their decision. Many species seemed curious about what these newcomers would say. Sarah took her seat and waited. Soon, Ayler called the session to order. "Welcome back, members of the council," the crystal being said. "Today we finalize our response to the Devourer threat. Ambassador, have you reached a decision?" Sarah stood up. Her legs felt more steady than they had yesterday. She had made her choice, and now she just needed to say it out loud. "Yes, honored Prime Speaker, humanity has reached a decision." The chamber grew quiet. Sarah could see beings leaning forward in their seats, eager to hear the youngest species finally accept galactic wisdom. After careful consideration of all the information presented, and long discussion with my government back on Earth, I must announce that humanity cannot agree with the proposed course of action. The silence continued for a moment, then broke as confused sounds filled the air. Sarah heard her translator working hard to convert all the different expressions of surprise into words she could understand. Cannot agree. Impossible. What do they mean? Aylar's crystalline form flickered with patterns Sarah had never seen before. Ambassador, perhaps there was a misunderstanding. We are not asking you to participate in the evacuation. Humanity lacks the resources to contribute meaningfully to such an operation. We are simply informing you of the galaxy's decision. I understand, Sarah said, but we cannot agree to let those people die without trying to save them. General stood up, his massive form towering over the other representatives. Young human, you misunderstand the situation. This is not a matter of opinion. This is survival. Your species will follow the galactic decision or face extinction alongside the Outer Rim colonies. Sarah felt her heart beating faster, but her voice remained steady. General, with respect, humanity will not abandon those people. The chamber erupted. Sarah heard sounds of shock, anger, and confusion from hundreds of different species. Some beings were standing up and making gestures that her translator could not convert. Others were rapidly talking into communication devices, probably reporting this unprecedented event to their home worlds. Elder's watery form glowed brighter. This is madness. No species has ever refused to follow galactic consensus on a survival matter. It goes against everything we have learned about civilization. Maybe it is time to learn something new, Sarah replied. El's mechanical voice cut through the noise. Calculate, one species with primitive technology against a force that required 50 advanced civilizations to defeat. Result, certain extinction. Logic suggests immediate recalculation of position. Our calculations are different, Sarah said. We calculate that some things are worth any risk. Aylar raised both arms and the chamber slowly grew quiet again. When the crystal being spoke, its voice was no longer musical. It sounded tired and frustrated. Ambassador, I believe you do not fully understand what you are saying. Let me be very clear. If humanity attempts to interfere with the evacuation or mount some foolish rescue operation, you will die. All of you. Your entire species will be extinct within a week. We understand the risks, Sarah said. Then why would you choose extinction over life? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Around her, nearly 1,000 beings waited for an answer that would make sense to them. But Sarah knew that her real answer would not make sense to species that had learned to accept necessary losses. Because some things matter more than survival, she said finally. The chamber exploded again, but this time the sounds were different. Sarah heard what her translator reported as insane, impossible, against all natural law. Some species seemed angry, others seemed afraid. A few sounded curious, as if they had never heard such an idea before. Sarah began gathering her papers and tablet. She had said what she came to say. Where are you going? Aylar asked, its voice now sharp with alarm. To organize a rescue operation, Sarah said simply. If the galactic community will not help those people, then humanity will try alone. You cannot leave, General rumbled. This meeting is not over. The galactic decision must be unanimous. Sarah looked up at the giant lizard warrior. Then I guess it will not be unanimous. She continued packing her things. Around her, the noise was growing louder. She heard beings speaking rapidly in their own languages, trying to figure out what to do about a species that would not accept the wisdom of the galaxy. This has never happened before, Elder said, its voice carrying a note of wonder. In 10 million years, no species has ever simply left. Sarah finished putting her papers in order and looked around the chamber one last time. She saw beings that had built wonders beyond human imagination, species that had survived everything the galaxy could throw at them, civilizations that had lasted longer than Earth had existed. But she also saw something else. She saw beings who had become so good at accepting loss that they had forgotten how to fight against it. We will be transmitting our rescue plans to any species that wants to help, Sarah announced. We know we cannot save everyone. We probably cannot save most of them, but we have to try." Ayler's form flickered rapidly. "This is madness. You will accomplish nothing except the destruction of your own species." "Maybe," Sarah said, "but we will not let those people die alone." She turned toward the exit. Behind her, the chamber was in chaos. Beings were shouting, demanding that she be stopped, asking what this meant for galactic unity. Some seemed to be arguing among themselves about what to do with a species that would not follow the rules. At the door, Sarah turned back one last time. "For what it is worth," she said, "we know you are trying to do the right thing. You are trying to save as much life as you can. But sometimes the right thing is not the smart thing." The door began to slide closed behind her. "Sometimes," she said through the narrowing gap, "you have to choose what matters over what works." The door sealed shut with a soft hiss. On one side, nearly 1,000 representatives of galactic civilization sat in stunned silence. On the other side, Sarah walked toward the docking bay where the human shuttle waited. She had work to do. The news spread across the galaxy faster than Sarah could have imagined. Within hours of her walking out of the council meeting, every major civilization had heard about humanity's impossible decision. Communication networks that usually carried trade reports and scientific discoveries now buzzed with one question: what were the humans thinking? On Earth, the emergency session of the United Earth Council lasted 18 hours. President Martinez sat at the head of the table, looking tired but determined. Around her were the leaders of every nation, all connected by quantum communication links. "So we are agreed," President Martinez asked. "We proceed with Operation Helping Hand." General Sarah, the ambassador's sister and head of Earth's military, nodded firmly. "Every ship we can spare is already being loaded with supplies. We have transport vessels, medical ships, even civilian cruise liners volunteering for evacuation duty." "The mathematics are not good," said Dr. Earth's chief scientist. "Our best estimates suggest we can evacuate maybe 50 million people before the Devourer fleet arrives. That leaves 199.95 billion we cannot save." "Then we save 50 million, President Martinez said, "and we keep trying to save more until we cannot try anymore." Across human space, something unprecedented was happening. Every shipyard was working around the clock to prepare vessels for evacuation duty. Military ships designed for fighting were being hastily converted to carry refugees. Cargo haulers were stripped of their usual loads and fitted with life support systems. Even luxury passenger ships had their entertainment areas converted into sleeping quarters. The human fleet that assembled at the rally point beyond Pluto was unlike anything Earth had ever launched. Over 3,000 ships of every size and type, all heading toward a battle they could not win to save people they had never met. Meanwhile, on Concordia Prime, the Galactic Council was in continuous session. For the first time in recorded history, they were dealing with a member species that had simply refused to follow the consensus. "We cannot allow this," General declared, packing around the central platform. "If word spreads that species can simply ignore galactic decisions, our entire system of cooperation will collapse." Ayler's crystal form was dim, showing deep concentration. "The humans present us with an unprecedented situation. In all our databases, there is no record of a species choosing certain extinction over survival." "Because it is insane," Al stated. "No intelligence capable of space travel should be capable of such illogical behavior. Yet observation confirms humans are indeed intelligent. The contradiction requires explanation." Elder's watery form swirled thoughtfully. "Perhaps we are witnessing evolution in action. Not biological evolution, but cultural evolution. The humans may represent a new type of intelligence, one that calculates differently than we do." "Different how?" asked Ambassador of the Symbiont Collective, a being that looked like a walking tree covered in glowing moss. "We calculate based on preservation," Elder explained. "Maximum survival with minimum risk. The humans seem to calculate based on principle. They appear to value abstract concepts more than concrete survival." News reports from across the galaxy showed the unprecedented response to humanity's decision. Some species were outraged, calling it dangerous stupidity that threatened galactic stability. Others seemed confused, unable to understand why any intelligence would make such a choice. But something unexpected was happening in the younger species. The reports were small at first, easy to miss among all the criticism and confusion. A few ships here and there, volunteering to join the human rescue fleet. Species that had been part of the galactic community for only a few thousand years instead of millions. The fish-like species that lived in underwater cities sent 12 transport ships. The crystalline chorus, beings made of living mineral who communicated through vibrations, contributed 6 vessels equipped with advanced sensors. The wanderer tribes, nomadic beings who lived their entire lives in space, offered 20 ships and their knowledge of deep space navigation. These species gave no official explanation for their decision. Their governments did not endorse the action, but individual ships and volunteer crews made their own choice to help. On the bridge of the Earth-ship Determination, Admiral watched the tactical display. The human rescue fleet was now approaching the outer rim, and they were not alone. Over the past 3 days, their fleet had grown from 3,000 ships to nearly 4,000 as vessels from other species joined them. "This is insane," muttered Commander Torres, the ship's tactical officer. "We are flying straight toward the most dangerous force in the galaxy with a fleet of cargo ships and passenger liners." "Yes," Admiral agreed, "but look at what we have accomplished already." The display showed the first refugee camps being established on empty worlds beyond the Devourer fleet's projected path. Supply ships were creating temporary colonies that could house millions of evacuees. Medical ships were setting up trauma centers for people who had lost everything. And the evacuations had begun. The first worlds to be cleared were the smallest ones, where the entire population could fit on a few large transport ships. The human fleet worked around the clock, loading frightened families into ships and carrying them to safety. But they were not the only ones working. Something strange was happening across the threatened sectors. Local defense forces that should have been retreating were instead helping with evacuations. Civilian ships that should have been fleeing were staying to help load refugees. Even some species that had supported the galactic decision were quietly sending unofficial aid. The rescue ships were filled with stories that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. Saurian warriors carrying human children to safety. Ethereal beings using their advanced technology to speed up loading procedures. Robots calculating optimal evacuation routes for human pilots. Not everyone was helping. The major galactic powers maintained their official position that the rescue operation was doomed and dangerous, but individuals from many species were making their own choices. On the 7th day after Sarah had walked out of the council meeting, the first reports came in that changed everything. A small human scout ship, the Brave Explorer, had encountered Devourer advanced scouts near a mining colony. Instead of running, the human ship had engaged the enemy. Captain Lisa Park was 26 years old and had never fought anything more dangerous than pirates. Her ship was a converted survey vessel with light weapons and no armor. The Devourer scout was a killing machine the size of a city block. The battle lasted 4 minutes. When it was over, the Devourer scout was destroyed and the Brave Explorer was badly damaged but still flying. Captain Park's message to the fleet was short. Enemy scout eliminated. Colony evacuation complete. Moving to next target. Across the galaxy, military analysts tried to understand how a small human ship had defeated a Devourer scout. The answer, when they found it, shocked them even more than the victory itself. Captain Park had not tried to outfight the enemy. She had not used advanced tactics or superior technology. Instead, she had done something the Devourer scout was not programmed to handle. She had rammed it while evacuating civilians were still loading onto her ship. The Devourer machine was designed to fight rational enemies who valued their own survival. It could not understand an enemy that would sacrifice itself to save others. Its programming had no response to such behavior. Word of the victory spread faster than the original news of humanity's decision. If one small human ship could defeat a Devourer scout, then maybe the rescue operation was not completely hopeless. More ships began volunteering from species that had remained neutral. Young officers from established civilizations requested transfers to the rescue fleet. Even some members of the Galactic Council began privately questioning whether the traditional response was the only option. But the real Devourer fleet was still coming. The main force would arrive in 3 days, and when it did, the galaxy would learn whether humanity's impossible choice had been bravery or simply a very noble form of suicide. Admiral stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking at the tactical display that showed thousands of ships racing to save as many lives as possible. In 3 days, they would face an enemy that had never been defeated by direct confrontation. "Admiral," her communications officer called out, "we are receiving a transmission from Concordia Prime. It is marked as official council business." "Put it through," Admiral said. Ayler's crystal form appeared on the main screen. The ancient being's light patterns showed emotions that the Admiral's translator could not identify. "Admiral," Ayler said, "the Galactic Council wishes to offer assistance to your rescue operation." Admiral smiled. "Welcome to the fleet." The Devourer fleet arrived exactly when the galaxy's best scientists had predicted. From deep space, it looked like a swarm of metal insects, each one larger than a human city. The main fleet consisted of over 2,000 vessels, moving in perfect formation toward the outer rim colonies. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Determination, watching the enemy approach on her tactical display. Around her ship, the combined rescue fleet held position near the last group of colonies still being evacuated. In the past week, they had saved over 100 million people, but there were still billions more on the remaining worlds. "How long until the evacuations are complete?" Admiral asked. Commander Torres checked his display. "The last transport ships will need 6 more hours to load all the civilians from the remaining colonies." "And how long until the Devourer fleet reaches us?" 4 hours. Admiral nodded. She had known this moment would come. The mathematics had always been against them. The only question was whether they could buy enough time for the last evacuations. "Send a message to all ships," she ordered. "Any vessel not essential for evacuation should prepare for combat. All civilian transports should begin immediate departure for the rally points." Across the rescue fleet, thousands of ships began moving into new positions. Transport vessels loaded with refugees turned away from the danger and headed for safety. The remaining ships, a mix of military vessels and converted civilian craft, formed a defensive line between the evacuees and the approaching enemy. The fleet that prepared to face the Devourer machines was unlike any force in galactic history. Human cruisers flew alongside Saurian battleships. Ethereal science vessels shared space with dreadnoughts. Species that had fought each other in ancient wars now worked together to protect civilians they had never met. On Concordia Prime, the emergency session of the Galactic Council watched through long-range sensors as the two fleets approached each other. For the first time in the Council's history, they were not just observing a crisis, but actively participating in it. Nearly every member species had contributed ships to the rescue operation. Ayler's crystal form flickered with patterns of anxiety and determination. "All our projections show the same result. The rescue fleet will delay the Devourers for perhaps 30 minutes before being completely destroyed. It is not enough time to complete the evacuations. "Then why are we doing this?" asked General, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Elder's watery form glowed softly. "Because the humans taught us something we had forgotten. Some actions are worth taking even when success is impossible." The first contact between the fleets happened at the edge of the star system. A wing of human fighters, supported by fast attack craft, engaged the Devourer advance scouts. The battle was brief and brutal. Half the defending ships were destroyed in the first exchange. But something unexpected happened. The Devourer scouts, programmed to face rational enemies, struggled against opponents who fought with no regard for their own survival. Human pilots rammed enemy ships when their weapons failed. Crews activated self-destruct sequences to take out multiple enemies. The scouts were destroyed, but at a cost that no sensible military would accept. "The enemy advance is delayed by 7 minutes, Commander Torres reported, "but we have lost 12 ships." "Every minute counts," Admiral replied. "Signal the next defensive line to prepare for engagement." The battle continued as the main Devourer fleet pushed deeper into the system. Each defensive position held longer than predicted, not because of superior technology or tactics, but because the defenders simply would not retreat. When ships were damaged, their crews fought on. When weapons failed, pilots used their vessels as weapons. The Devourer's artificial intelligence began to show signs of confusion. Their tactical programming was based on millions of years of fighting logical enemies who valued self-preservation. They could not adapt to opponents who seemed to actively seek destruction in order to protect others. But the rescue fleet was paying a terrible price. For every Devourer ship destroyed, they lost 3 of their own. Admiral watched her tactical display as the symbols representing friendly ships disappeared one by one. "Admiral," her communications officer called out, "we are receiving an urgent message from Transport Group 7. They need 15 more minutes to complete evacuation of the last colony." Admiral looked at her display. The main Devourer fleet would reach the colony in 10 minutes. "Signal all remaining combat ships," she ordered. "Form up on the Determination. We are going to buy them those 15 minutes." What happened next would be studied by military historians for generations. A combined fleet of fewer than 800 ships, most of them damaged, charged directly at the main Devourer fleet. It was not a battle in any traditional sense. It was a sacrifice, made in the hope that it would matter. The human ship Last Stand was the first to ram a Devourer battleship, taking out 3 enemy vessels in the explosion. The Saurian dreadnought Honor's Edge followed, using its massive bulk to clear a path for smaller ships. An ethereal science vessel overloaded its power core, creating an energy pulse that disabled an entire Devourer squadron. Captain of the transport ship Safe Harbor was loading the last group of children from an orphanage when the Devourers reached the colony. Her ship was not designed for combat, but it had defensive shields and a crew that refused to abandon the children. The battle above the colony lasted 7 minutes. When it ended, the Safe Harbor was the only ship still flying. Captain had somehow managed to keep her shields up long enough for the last evacuation ship to escape with the children. Her final transmission to the fleet was simple: package delivered, all souls safe. Across the galaxy, beings watched in amazement as the impossible happened. The Devourer fleet, which had never been stopped by direct confrontation, began to retreat. Their artificial intelligence could not process enemies that valued others' lives more than their own. Every tactical program they ran ended in the same error: opponent behavior does not compute. The retreat was not a defeat in military terms. The Devourers had destroyed most of the rescue fleet and could still complete their mission. But their programming required them to understand their enemies in order to fight efficiently. They could not understand the rescue fleet, so they to analyze the new data. In the silence that followed, rescue ships emerged from hiding to pick up survivors and complete the evacuations. The last transport vessel cleared the outer rim colonies 6 hours later, carrying refugees who should have been impossible to save. On Concordia Prime, the Galactic Council sat in stunned silence as they processed the battle reports. Nearly 4,000 ships had been destroyed, but over 200 million lives had been saved. By any traditional calculation, it was a terrible loss, but somehow it felt like a victory. Sarah, who had spent the battle coordinating refugee camps, stood before the council once more. But this time, the chamber was different. Representatives from dozens of species wore black bands to honor the dead. Others displayed symbols of respect that her translator could not convert. "Ambassador," Ayler said, its voice carrying tones of wonder and grief, "your species has shown us something we thought was impossible. You have changed the very nature of warfare in this galaxy." "We did not change anything," Sarah replied quietly. "We just remembered something we should never have forgotten." "Which is?" Sarah looked around the chamber at beings who had survived for millions of years by making smart choices and accepting necessary losses. Species who had built wonders that humans could barely imagine. Civilizations that had created peace and prosperity on a galactic scale. "That some things are worth any cost," she said. "That every life matters. That the point of survival is not just to exist, but to remain worthy of existing." In the weeks that followed, the galaxy slowly changed. Species that had accepted the wisdom of necessary sacrifice began to question whether necessity was the only consideration. Young civilizations found their voices, speaking up about values beyond pure survival. The Devourer fleet eventually returned, but they found a galaxy that fought differently. Instead of calculating losses and accepting defeats, the combined species fought with the desperate creativity of beings who refused to let others die alone. It took 3 more battles before the Devourers were finally driven back into their deep space hibernation. The cost was enormous, but this time, no one was abandoned. Every world that could be saved was saved. Every civilian that could be evacuated was evacuated. The Galactic Council established a new principle, carved into crystal monuments on 1,000 worlds: leave no one behind. And in the quiet of her quarters aboard Concordia Prime, Sarah looked out at the stars and thought about all the people who were alive because someone had been willing to try the impossible. Her grandmother would have been proud.